Choices have consequences. And that's a very important discussion to have. That if you make a decision one way, there will be consequences. If you make a decision another way, there will be consequences. If you don't make a decision at all, there will still be consequences. It's important to understand that all of us make decisions, because even when you don't make a decision, you have made a decision. For example, you on a Sunday morning, you can decide either to go to church or not to go to church. Either choice will have consequence. And it's very important to understand that because you now know that choices have consequences, you are not left with just ignoring. Because ignoring is still making a decision. To ignore. You have decided to ignore. No, I didn't make a decision. I did not make up my mind. You made your mind by deciding not to make up your mind. The thing I want to emphasize in this discussion is that it's impossible not to decide. What we really have to make a choice about is what kind of decision will you make? Have you weighed the consequences? Are you willing to live with the consequences? I'm always talking to my friends about one of the things that I find very interesting. You see somebody does something, the consequences, the likely consequences are obvious. When the consequences happen, the guy is in shock, almost in depression. And I say, surely, couldn't you have seen there was a possibility of this happening? And when it happens, shouldn't you be ready for it? It doesn't mean you enjoy it, because of course, when you take a risk, it's a risk. And you have weighed, you have options, but the risk happens. Now, when it happens, you should be certainly disappointed because you hoped to the very best it wouldn't happen. But when it happens, you should not be in shock. You should be disappointed, but you should not be in shock. And that's what all of us have to deal with. As you get older, you look at decisions you made in the past and why they have brought you to where you are today, and you regret for those kind of decisions. The younger you are, the more important your decisions will be. Because if you are in your 80s and you make a wrong decision, you will suffer the consequence of just a few years and you are gone. Number one. Number two, it will impact less by the time you are 80s. For most people, even their grandchildren are adults. So the impact of a wrong decision by somebody in his 80s will not be such a serious. It will certainly have consequence, but it will not have as much of the consequence because not as many people. So first of all, for him, he's not likely to live long. Number two, the kind of people he impacts will be less and for a less time. So it just then means that as you discuss these issues, that the choices have consequences, the younger you are, the greater is the impact you are going to have. Because some of the decisions you make will be with you. For example, you make a decision to test sex. It's just you're testing. And just that test, the guy who is willing to test it with you, is because he has done it before. For him, it's not the first time. But you understand that in terms of HIV, you are not just sleeping with him. You are sleeping with all the people he has slept with before. Because he may be HIV positive, but he's not even aware himself. So he's actually not a bad boy. But you end up HIV positive yourself. And as you suffer the consequences of HIV, it will be because of the decision you made to test something which you should not have tested. And it has consequences. It will take you longer. So the point I'm making is you will end up having longer impact. Your decisions as a younger person have longer impact. For example, you make up your mind to drop out of college. And because you have certain exciting things you are doing. Then at the age of 40, you run out of the excitement. You may still be living to the age of 80. What happens? For 40 years, you keep regretting the fact that in your teenage, you dropped out of school, or in your 20s, you dropped out of university without thinking through. Of course, the same thing with to take a course or not to take a course, to do your professional exams or not to do your professional exams. You know, like you keep saying, I'll do it. Then they change the syllabus, and even what you had done earlier is lost because you'd have to begin from the beginning for your professional exams. All these are decisions you have to make. And the people of Israel in the book of Deuteronomy were told they cannot ignore choices. The choices will be there. Just look together in the book of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 11. We read, "Love the Lord your God and keep his requirements, his decrees, his laws, and his commands always. Remember today that your children were not the ones who saw and experienced the discipline of the Lord your God, his majesty, his mighty hand, his outstretched arm, the signs he performed, and the things he did in the heart of Egypt, both to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to his whole country. What he did to the Egyptians' army, to its horses and chariots, how he overwhelmed them with the waters of the Red Sea as they were pursuing you, and how the Lord brought lasting ruin on them. It was not your children who saw what he did for you in the wilderness until you arrived at this place, and what he did to Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, the Reubenites, when the earth opened its mouth right in the middle of all Israel and swallowed them up with their households, their tents, and every living thing that belonged to them. Verse 7, but it was your own eyes that saw all these great things the Lord has done. What are we learning? Choices have consequences. They are being encouraged. Please be obedient. And in order to help you to be obedient, just think about choices that have been made in the past. It is you, Moses is telling the people listening to him, you are alive. You and me were alive. And we saw those things. We saw how Egypt decided to molest the people of God, to disobey the Most High God, and the consequences that they suffered. God, his majesty, his mighty hand, his outstretched arm, decided to show signs to the Egyptians, both that affected the Pharaoh, the king, and the whole of the country of Egypt. Because of resisting, Pharaoh did not weigh his options. He did not realize he's not a king against a king. He's not Moses against Pharaoh. Pharaoh kept being told, God is saying, let my people go. But he decided not to weigh, who am I dealing with? What are likely to be the consequences? This is somebody can handle. And he decided to take God on. What happened? He destroyed his kingdom. The plagues that followed, the 10 plagues that followed, each of them destroyed the people of God. By the time it was time to leave, the Egyptians had to bribe the Israelites. Oh, please go. What do you want? All the gold, the silver, the whatnot, they were given gifts to leave. The Egyptians were totally tired of having this God deal with them. But you know, that was because of the decisions of leadership of Pharaoh that brought ruin on his people. And nothing has changed. We still know in Africa the number of decisions that our leaders have made and the consequences that follow, that affect people. You need to understand clearly that when a leader makes a wrong decision, it affects the people. But you as an individual make a wrong decision, it will affect you and the people that are connected with you. So they are being reminded. Do you remember those choices? Do you remember the wrong choice by the Egyptians and Pharaoh? Do you remember the consequences that actually followed and the kind of suffering they did? Now, as if that's not bad enough, after they had released them, they're happy to go. They said, wait a minute, why did we allow them to go? So they decide to follow. The whole army is mobilized, and they start to follow, just to discover the Israelites actually, the way the Lord led them, to a corner. In front of them is not a river, a Red Sea. And I know that I used to read in the Bible until I got a chance to go to Port Sudan, which is on the Red Sea. And I realized you can't see across. It's not a river. It's not a place you can decide to swim across. So the Israelis were dead meat. The whole army is coming, and they knew, wow, we have caught them. What a wrong decision. Again, they forgot they were not fighting against the Israelis. They were fighting against God. So right at the Red Sea, desert on either side, and behind them, they have the army coming. The Egyptians made a wrong choice by forgetting clearly that they are dealing with God. So they decided to follow. Moses is told, take your stake. The whole sea opens. It's a long sea because they actually walked throughout the night. They were walking across. But the Egyptians decided to follow. Wrong choice again. By the time the Egyptians, first of all, in between, God makes the technology not work. The wheels were stuck in the sea to slow them down. And so the Israelis come out on the other side. And all the Egyptian army is actually swept back and dead. All because of choices. As we discuss this, what choices are you making? And I think one of the things we are learning here is, are you taking God into the picture? Do you realize what God would want? Are you fighting against God? Saul of Tarsus was told, you are fighting against God is like hitting the goads. Is when you keep hitting your head against a stone, the stone will not suffer. You just come out bloody. Is it that, for example, you have decided not to follow God's decrees? Do you understand you are fighting against Him and His promises? Is it you have decided you will not get born again? What are the implications? Here we are learning they made the wrong decision twice. First of all in Egypt, then they made a wrong decision in deciding to follow. Then verse 5, we are told that's not the only place you can see wrong decisions. He's saying, you saw it, not your children, but you. Moses tells them. Verse 6, you know what God did to Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, the Reubenite, when the earth opened its mouth right in the middle of all Israel and swallowed them up with their households, their families, their tents, everything was swallowed up by the earth. It just opened like a mouth up and covered it. What have they decided? To be rebellious against Moses. Not understanding, again, they were not dealing with Moses. They are dealing with God. Moses on his own could not make the earth open up and swallow them. But that's what happened to Dathan and Abiram when they rebelled at the wrong time. So even, for example, as a young man, as you rebel against your parents, you better be wise and ask, who am I rebelling against? Is it God? Is it my parents? What are likely to be the consequences if you do that? So those are three different decisions. You're talking about the Pharaoh in Egypt, Pharaoh at the Red Sea, Dathan and Abiram rebelling against Moses. What decisions are you making or have you made? The good thing is that before the punishment happens, you still can revert. Like Pharaoh could have decided, I realize I'm not fighting against these guys. Why are they standing there looking like dead meat? Is there something not quite right? But he didn't think. He just thought of his power. Somebody said power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he was absolutely corrupt because he ended up getting his whole army and the utensils of military warfare all destroyed because of a wrong decision. Is that where you are yourself? Are you making wrong decisions? Are you willing to go through the consequence? You know, in verse 8 we read, observe therefore all the commands I'm giving you today, so that you may have the strength to go all in and take over the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, and so that you may live long in the land the Lord swore to your ancestors to give them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. The land you are entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt, from which your parents, they are being reminded about the importance, very, very important thing, that as if they make the right decisions, they are going to end up with the benefits of the new land. But when they make the wrong decisions, they will miss it. The land you are entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt. You are going to a much better land, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by food as a vegetable garden. In Egypt, they relied on irrigation. But the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is the land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain right from heaven. You don't have to, the heavens irrigates for you. It's a land the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on from the beginning of the year to its end. What are you learning? They are being told, here is the offer. Obey me, or keep my commands. This is what is on offer. And it is exactly the same thing for you. You have to make up your mind. Do you want to obey God? But if you obey God, there will be certain freedoms that you cannot follow. There are certain requirements, but then there are certain benefits. Will you make a decision for Him? Verse 13, so if you faithfully obey the commands I'm giving you today, to love the Lord your God and to serve Him with all your heart and with all your soul, then I'll send rain on your land in its season, both autumn and spring rains, so that you may gather in your grain, new wine, and olive oil. I'll provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. That's a promise. But there's a condition. If you faithfully obey the commands I'm giving you to do. What the summary of all I'm asking you to do? To love the Lord your God and serve Him with all your heart and with all your soul. Don't do it as a duty. It should be something you enjoy doing, you want to do. That's why it comes from your heart. If you do that, the rain of heaven will be in season, and out of season there will be rain. That is, both autumn and spring, there will be rain, and you end up getting grain. That is, if that is a choice you have actually made. If you make a choice to be lazy, you certainly, for example, harvest what laziness brings. If you make a choice to be rebellious, there will be benefits out of the choice to be rebellious. If you make a choice to be somebody who is responsible and disciplined, there will be benefits out of that. Verse 16 says, be careful, or you will be enticed to turn away and worship other gods and bow down to them. Then the Lord's anger will burn against you, and He will shut up the heavens so that it will not rain, and the ground will yield no produce, and you will soon perish from the good land the Lord is giving you. Fix these words of mine in your heart and minds, tie them as symbols on your hands and braid them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down And when you get up, write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors, as many as the days that the heavens are above the earth. So the first thing you have been promised is, if you obey me, this will be the benefits. Now he comes and says, okay, you choose to disobey me. I will stop the rains of heaven and I'll remove you from the land I'm giving you. And actually this happened. What we are seeing here, they are being given choices. They made a choice. A generation came that made a choice to disobey God. And there was no rain. In fact, Elijah one time tells them, there will be no rain until I say so. And for 3 years, there was no rain in the days of Ahab and Jezebel. My friend, you need to understand that Elijah was acting on the basis of what was on offer. Make a decision one way, this will happen. You make a decision another way, this happens. Choices have consequences. They have been told, if you make a choice to obey me, this will be the benefit. If you make a choice to disobey me, then I'll stop the rains of heaven and I'll remove you from this land. Verse 22 says, if you carefully observe all these commands I am giving you to follow, to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him and to hold fast to them, then the Lord will drive out all these nations before you, and you will dispossess nations larger and stronger than you. Every place where you set your foot will be yours. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea. No one will be able to stand against you. The Lord your God, as he promised you, will put the terror and fear of you on the whole land where you go. Make a choice. If you observe these commands I'm giving you to follow, then this is the real estate I'm giving you. From the river Euphrates will be one boundary. The Mediterranean Sea will be the other boundary. The desert where the Dead Sea is will be one boundary, just next to Egypt, will be one boundary. Then Lebanon, the forest of Lebanon, will be the upper limit. That is the real estate to be yours. Because no nation will be able to fight you out of that land. But they have a condition to keep. That is, if you obey me, not just now, but your future generation. So what should you do? Talk to your children. And that's exactly what the parents are being told. You make a choice that all your children need is academic education. You take them to boarding school at a very young age so that you do not have any input in their life. You want them to become academic giants. They become academic giants. They do well in school, but mess up their lives. You made a choice by not making a choice. But he's saying, no, don't do that. Let your children talk to your children about the importance of obedience to God. Do it when you're at home. Do it when you are walking. Let them know the benefits of walking with the Lord. And they are being told, fix the words of mine. Verse 18, fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. That means you talk biblically. Somebody called it, you are Christocentric. You see everything through the eyeglasses of Christ. So you interpret. Your worldview is a biblical worldview. You interpret things from God's perspective. That's what he means by putting the word of God in your heart and your mind. And putting them as symbols on your hands and beds. In other words, you are openly biblical. You don't hide about it. That's, some people can't even pray in a restaurant because they are afraid they'll be embarrassing. People will start thinking, so they can't do anything that will make them people pick out they are Christians. No. It says, be openly and proudly biblical in your outlook so that your children can watch and obey. In the process, not only will they be a success in what they put to do, but they'll also walk with the Lord and have his blessings, which will be something very, very useful. Verse 26 says, see, I'm setting before you today a blessing or a curse. You have a choice, a blessing or a curse. The blessing if you obey the commands of the Lord your God that I am giving you today. The curse, if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God and turn from the way that I command you today by following other gods, which you have not known. Verse 29, when the Lord your God has brought you into the land you are entering to possess, you are to proclaim on Mount Gerizim the blessings, and on Mount Ebal the curses. As you know, these mountains are across the Jordan, westward towards the setting sun, near the great trees of Moreh, in the territory of those Canaanites living in the Arabah, in the vicinity of Gilgal. You are about to cross the Jordan to enter and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you. When you have taken it over and are living there, be sure that you obey all the decrees, the law and laws I'm setting before you today. So, there is God coming out very clear. You have a choice. Verse 26. I'm setting before you a choice. Choose blessings or curses. Blessings if you live in obedience. Curses when you don't obey God. And he's saying, you need to, when you arrive in Canaan, you must list down the blessings are promised and read them loudly on Mount Gerizim. And then on Mount Ebal, go and read the curses. So it's going to be dramatic, On one mountain, you read the blessings. The other mountain, you read the curses. Let the people make a choice, but let them make informed choice. Let them clearly understand what is on offer. That's what really, as we finish, this is one of the things you have to make sure. If choices have consequences, it then means you don't make a choice without thinking. Always sleep over a matter. Don't be quick to make a choice whose consequence will last a lifetime, and you are in a hurry to make the choice. God is telling these people, think about it. This is what is on offer. You can reject it or accept it. These are God. And so I hear they are being told consideration, evaluation, first of all, of history, where you have gone through, what has happened. Number 2, of the consequences of one decision compared with the consequences of another decision. Number 3, who the enemy is. Who am I dealing with? And what is it likely to do? You are looking in the future and looking what can go well and what can go bad. Then now, make a decision. That's why, like I've said elsewhere, a pessimist is a person who only wants to concentrate on one type of consequence. An optimist only wants to concentrate on the other type of consequence. A realist looks at an issue, what could go wrong and what could go right, and makes a decision, a realistic decision. May the Lord help us to understand that we have choices to make, and that those choices He is willing to support if they are choices that honor Him and glorify Him. They are choices that serve Him. And by the way, when you talk about serving God, it is not just serving God, it is serving God's people. You are making decisions that will benefit God's people. But if you make selfish decisions, evil decisions, please remember, choices have consequences. And those consequences will impact you, and those consequences will impact others because of the choices you made. May the Lord help you to make choices. If you make good choices, you'll enjoy your life. You make bad choices, you may look like temporarily you're enjoying, but the end final result will be destruction. So you need to be very careful what decisions you make, just like the Israelites were told by Moses. And later we see in life how bad choices brought Israel into ruin, how good choices brought them into blessings. May the Lord help us to make good choices that will be a blessing to us and blessings to our heritage. Thank you.